Stories that are untold, underreported, and all-out inspirational. Carey Pena reports.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carey Pena. Thank you so much for listening to Carey Pena Reports and for watching us on Facebook and YouTube. You can always find all of our podcasts and content at inspiredmedia360.com. On this show, we share stories of inspiration and transformation. And in studio with me today is a man who has had a major life transformation. My good friend, Brandon Lee.
It's so good to be here.
So great to have you in studio.
Almost, right? Remember when I moved to Arizona at the end of 2013 and we ended up anchoring together?
I know. Well, I should tell the listeners and viewers, Brandon and I are very close friends. Yes. And we used to anchor the news together. And you have taken a break from TV news and courageously decided to share a story that you kept very personal for a very long time. In fact, even as close as we were, I only knew in dribs and drabs kind of what was really going on. Your new book says it all.
Yeah, it says everything.
It says everything. I had to brace myself before I read it. It's called Mascara Boy, Bullied, Assaulted, and Near Death, Surviving Trauma and Addiction. So Brandon has taken a break from TV news to be able to write this book and really to be able to unburden yourself. So let's start there. What gave you the courage to finally tell this story?
And there is such a defining moment in Arizona, and it was after the fact that you and I had anchored together. Mm-hmm. So much of my sobriety had always been very private. I never felt a need to ever speak out publicly about it. But after, it was about 2 years ago, in fact, during the Me Too era, the Me Too movement, what that movement did is it gave people who had been carrying that shame and guilt of being a victim of sex abuse or sex assault or even sexual harassment, Carey, it was like strength in numbers. The more people that came out with the hashtag Me Too, people were putting a face to the trauma that they felt. And what that did is it was like a domino effect for other people to come forward. And it was during the Me Too era that I decided to share for the first time publicly on social media that I was a victim of child sex abuse. That every Friday when my piano teacher came over to our house, I would sit there on the piano bench and I would start playing the piano. Every mistake that I made, he assaulted me. And that assault got worse and more graphic over time. And my youth soccer coach was molesting me. I never told anybody about that. I kept that to myself my whole life because I felt the shame. I felt guilty. I felt like I had done something. I felt dirty, to be quite honest with you. Yeah. But I saw all these people coming forward in the Me Too movement. And that's when I said, I felt safe enough.
Do you remember that moment?
I do, because it was actually during the Judge Kavanaugh hearings. And I just was witnessing all the vitriol on social media saying, why did Dr. Christine Blasey Ford wait 30 years to come forward with this? This is all political. And I thought to myself, my assault happened 30 years ago and I haven't told anybody. So does that mean what happened to me didn't happen to me? Does that make me a liar? I was upset. I was angry because I believed her. And I felt people didn't believe her. So that gave me the strength to come out about my sex assault. Now, you asked me about my addiction. A year and a half ago, I went into our news director's office. You all know the same managers that I do. And I went in there saying, folks, we got an opioid crisis here in the Valley. And I know this because I'm in recovery, right? I work with young addicts trying to get sober. And so I wanted to do a story on needle exchange programs and the heroin epidemic. And when I was shooting that story, Carey, I saw these moms in Range Rovers showing up to a needle exchange, a vacant parking lot. And I saw the rear view windows coming down and two kids' heads popped out of that window as they watched their mom standing in line to get heroin needles. And then I met a Valley preschool teacher who lost her job because she was a heroin addict. And I saw when that story aired, I went home that night and started reading the comments on Facebook and social media, people calling these people trash and scum and homeless. And I cried and I broke down. I called my sponsor in the 12-step program that I'm a member of. And I said, I'm done. I've got to put a face to this. These people at home need to know that I used to be that junkie. And is that what they think of me now? Come with me to a meeting. I'll show you there are doctors and lawyers, pharmaceutical reps. All these people are recovered addicts. Addiction does not discriminate.
So I want to take people through sort of your journey.
Yeah.
But before we do, I want to stay with the fact that when you had that epiphany and you went home and cried, you're a public person. And there is a lot of risk in our business.
Huge risk.
You have to put on a certain face.
Yeah.
And you are the face of a station. And so it takes a certain amount of courage. What was running through your mind knowing that you're really risking your job?
I am risking a lot. And I am the fact of me coming forward and sharing in this book every detail and every scar that I went through as a child, but also as an adult, I take full responsibility of the actions and the choices I made.
Yeah.
All right. As an adult, we make choices despite the trauma that happened. I take full responsibility for that. At the same time, Carey, I only want to work for a company and a business out there who loves me and accepts everything about me. Was it nervous? Yes. Am I still nervous and a little scared and a little fearful? Honestly, sure.
Well, for the longest time, for podcast listeners, they can't see you. So Brandon's sleeved. He has tats up both arms and on your chest and all. I mean, you're fully tatted.
I covered my body
but you
with
would
tattoos.
we would go out to do appearances and you would make sure your sleeves were all the way down. For the longest time, you couldn't even reveal that part of yourself.
Why? Because there's a stigma attached to people with tattoos. People see a guy inked up as much as I am, they automatically think I'm trouble, that I've been trouble, and that I'm not going to be a good citizen in a working environment. That's a stigma that exists. Similar to the same addiction stigma that exists for addicts. If somebody knows you were a drug addict, the first thing they think of is you must be a criminal, a thug, or a thief.
And you wanted to tell this story, to say that the guy you see on the news, this successful, handsome guy, has a lot of secrets buried.
Well, we were talking about the TV world, and people who are on TV feel this immense pressure from the companies that they work for to portray on social media that they have some perfect life. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? I challenge that way of thinking because we don't relate to perfection. I don't relate to perfection. Viewers and listeners don't relate to perfection because their lives are not perfect. We relate to one another when we open up and we share our traumas and our scars. That's how we relate as Americans. And so that's why I'm calling on all my sober brothers and sisters who have time in sobriety. They're living beautiful lives. Folks, it is time to break your anonymity. It is time to put a face to addiction so that we end the stigma. The more success stories of addiction that we get out there, the more it'll inspire that person who's suffering in silence. I want to add this. It's the same reason why I do not call myself an addict anymore. And it took me many years to get to this point.
Yeah.
I now call myself a recovered addict because I want that person who's suffering to know there is light at the end of the tunnel. You can overcome this. It takes some work. It takes a lot of rewiring of the brain, but you can do this. But I'm a recovered addict.
You are 10 years sober, but I want to tell people that the depth of your addiction was so dark and so deep. You nearly died.
Twice in 1 week.
And I mean, you were addicted to drugs and alcohol to the point where your life for a significant period of
Even
time
while I was working
was spinning out of control. In fact, you basically were living a double life.
I probably lived the perfect double life. Everyone saw me as this television news reporter and anchor. No one knew that 11 p.m. when the news got done, I would go into my car. I would do a dose of GHB. It's the liquid date rape drug. It gives me 15 minutes to get to where I need to go before that drug hits. And that's when I used to go to bathhouses and I used to live in the slums of Los Angeles. And one story when I did GHB in the parking lot of work and I was leaving the news studios. I passed out and blacked out on the 110 freeway in Los Angeles. I woke up on the side of the freeway 4 hours later. My whole seat was reclined. My hazards were on. Some higher power was keeping me alive that night that pulled my car over to the side of the road so I didn't kill somebody else and I didn't harm myself. Then 2 weeks later is when I overdosed in the slums of Los Angeles. And unfortunately, that one of the guys I was using drugs with had the wherewithal to at least call the ambulance to take me to the hospital. And I was in a coma and I had blacked out. The moment I got out of that coma, I walked out of that hospital with my hospital robe on and those little, socks with the little rubber things on the bottom. I walked down Sunset Boulevard all the way and I found my car. And what did I do when I got in my car? I opened up my center console and I got out my crack pipe. And that's when I started smoking again. The next thing I remember, I woke up in the same ER in a coma on life support. My life saved by the same team of miracle workers. And a little nurse heard me crying in a hospital room. And she came over and she held my hand and she says, "Brandon, do you believe in God?" And I looked at her and I said, "No, I don't." And she goes, that's okay, because God still believes in you. And she pulled out a little flyer for me, and she goes, they have these things. It's like a little AA meeting at my church. Make me this promise. I saved your life twice this week. Will you please go to this meeting? And I did. When I got out of that hospital, I went to that one AA meeting, and I have been sober ever since that day.
Talk to the audience about how you fundamentally worked through getting past the shame and just owning it.
Oh man, it was so hard. I will first say that even as a sex addict, even towards the end of my sobriety, I didn't want to live that life anymore. And there's one scene that I always tell. I was in the parking lot of a bathhouse, a rundown bathhouse in Los Angeles. I had tears rolling down my face. And I was watching all these guys walk into this bathhouse with backpacks on, and I knew that they had all their drug paraphernalia in it. And I was crying in that car. And I said, I don't want to live this life anymore. I don't want to live like this. I want to get married. I want a life. I want a monogamous relationship with kids in a house with my husband. And what did I do? I got high with my crack pipe, and I walked in like a zombie that I was. Now, how did I work through all that? I immediately got a sponsor in the AA program, and this is what my sponsor told me. He goes, all right, buddy, we're going to tackle a bunch of things at once. No sex for an entire year. No porn for an entire year, and no dating for a year. That essentially rewired my brain. I only knew how to have sex high on drugs. I couldn't even tell my sponsor the last time I had sober sex. So you take the drugs away from me, I didn't even know how to have sex. Like body functions were not working. And I was like, is it ever going to work again? It did, and it came back with a vengeance. But I had been able to rewire my brain to the extreme that actually my sponsor once said, he goes, brother, you went from the brothel to the convent. Like there was a period of 2 years I had zero sex. And so it was all about finding that middle ground. The thing about sex is this. People in recovery don't even like to talk about it. And I'm like, dude, we need to talk about sex. And here's the thing. You can't quit sex like you do drugs and alcohol. Mm-hmm. Sex is healthy. Mm-hmm. We've got to find a way to have it. So that's one thing you can't give up, but you got to find a healthy way to do it. But my sex addiction started at age 15 when I was down in Laguna Beach. Yeah. And I was getting high, and I was already acting out sexually at such a young age, having sex with much older men than me.
Which you reflect upon in the book, talking about now as a grown man, you realize those were really instances where you were being assaulted.
And that was hard for me to come to grips with. It was my therapist who got me to that point, because
that's rape.
Yeah. I didn't see it that way, because I told her, I was like, no, it wasn't. I wanted it. And she goes, okay, you need to go home, and you're going to come back here with 3 pictures of yourself at age 15 for the next week's session. And I did that. And she goes, now stare at them. She goes, how old are you? And I'm like, at that time I was 37. She goes, would you have sex with that kid? And that was the first time I saw myself as that little skinny, scrawny kid. But in my mind, I was so much older, likely because of all the survival that I had to go through and the trauma that I had to go through, that I felt like I was much older than I was. Mm-hmm. And that was the first time I realized I had sex with a different guy every night of the week for 4 years. So you multiply that, that is just repeated rape after rape after rape that I was doing to myself. And I did that because of what happened to me as a child.
So when you tell these stories in the book, were you at first, when you started writing this script, were you ashamed that people would know all of these things about you?
I know that there will still be people who will not, they'll read the book by its cover, but they won't read it to the very end. And I know that people will take a snap judgment about me doing this podcast and, being on TV and talking about this. There are going to be people who are going to judge me. But there's one thing that I learned in recovery that I absolutely love. What you think of me is none of my business. I have to stand and live in my truth. So your thoughts about my life, it's none of my business. You can have those thoughts. I don't need them in my life.
One thing that you're trying to expose and get more conversation about with regard to addiction is that most addiction is rooted in trauma. And that's what you had to work through so hard and for so many years. And you also have a complicated relationship with several of your family members. So
it's very tough.
That adds another really painful element of telling this story, because you talk about in the book how hurt you were by
my mom,
by your mom.
I know, it's really hard. And there are moments in my day that I long to have a relationship with her again. But the thing that I've had to come to grips with is that it likely will never happen. My mom, when I told her 9 months sober, when I made my amends to them, they never knew I was a drug addict. I kept it from them. And that moment when I told her that I died twice in 1 week, You know, she never once called me a week later to say, hey, are you still sober? How are you doing? She's never once called me on my AA birthday to ask me how recovery is going. She's never even asked me if I've had a boyfriend or if I have a relationship in my life, because it's always about her. And almost she looks at the path that I took and went down is a stain on her. And she's like, I raised this perfect boy. What happened to you? And it's like, do you not recall what you did to me? You know, and it's really tough. But at the same time, I have an older sister, my sister Stephanie, who is like my rock, and I love her. She's my family. That's okay. She's the best thing that's happened to me and my family.
One of the things I like that you're putting the message out, and I think it's so needed, is talking about coming to terms with where you are and the forgiveness and letting people go from your life. So one of the passages in your book, you say your past does not define who you are now or who you will become in the future. Forgiveness exists in our world as the greatest healing force God ever created.
Yeah. I mean, you know what the hard part is about getting sober is you're going to lose about 99.9% of your friends. It's like mourning the loss of a loved one. And I held on to a group of friends I used to party with for 5 years into my recovery. I was holding on to that, and I was putting myself in some really dangerous situations. My friends that I was holding on to, I used to party with, I was like 3 years sober. I held one of my friends in my arms. He was overdosing on GHB. I was holding him in my arms at a party. And I'm like, what am I doing? And that's when at 5 years sober, when I went home to Los Angeles and I went to a meeting on that 5-year anniversary, I took a chip back to the hospital that they had saved my life. And I walked into the emergency room. I walked down the hallway and I talked to the head ER doctor, and she whistled around all the nurses, and they all came over. And I said, my name's Brandon. I said, 5 years ago today, you saved my life. You saved me from death. And I came back here to give you my 5-year token to know that all your efforts saved me, and I'm trying to make something for myself. Thank you for saving my life. There was not a dry eye in that room. And I looked over, and guess who was there? That little nurse who gave me that flyer to go to my very first AA meeting. I left that hospital and I was staying at my ex's house, that group of partying friends of mine. And I went back there and they were having a big old orgy with a lot of drugs. And they knew I was staying there. And instead of getting mad, I said, you know what my higher power just showed me today? That was the moment I needed, because my higher power said, Brandon, this is where your life used to be. And this is where your life is now. I sat my friends down. I said, I love you. I will always care about you. I will always cherish the times we had. But I'm going to let you know I'm going to be back here in Los Angeles, and I'm not going to call you, because I have to go in this path forward with my life. I can't be in the path with you guys anymore. And that was really tough. But now I look at my life and I see all the friends that are in my life today. They're normie. What we call normies. They can have a glass of wine and be totally normal. They're not drug addicts. They're not alcoholics. These are good quality people.
You don't drink at all, though, to be clear.
Yeah, I do not drink at all.
Right.
No, I don't drink. I don't drug. I don't have a craving for it.
Yeah, you're actually annoyingly healthy to be around.
I am
Going out to lunch with you is actually
It's crazy that I used to here's the crazy part. It's like you used to put cleaning solution in your body. And now I'm like, is it organic?
And now you're like, is there dressing on that, or can I just have the kale?
It's so ridiculous.
But I do want to circle back to because in your book, that to me was one, there's so much emotional moments. There's so many moments in here. But when you went back to visit that hospital, and then the nurse was there, and she said to you, and I'm quoting from your book, God will always believe in you, even when you don't believe in him. That was like, wow.
Yeah. You want to know why? You want to know why that is so profound to me? Is because at the depths of my using, at the depths and the darkest, when I started using crystal meth and I breathed in that meth into my body, I breathed the devil into my soul. And at the depths of my using, I was seeking out Satan worshipers. I don't know what led me there other than meth did. And so when I got clean and sober, that was one of the things that I couldn't even share with my sponsor. I was so ashamed of that. And when I was in a meeting one time, it was 9 months into the program, I raised my hand in front of a group of strangers and I said, I have a deep, dark secret I have to let out, or I'm going to go out and use again. And I told them, I said, I've been hanging out with Satan worshipers at the depths of my addiction, and God can never forgive me. And that's when a woman at the meeting came up to me, handed me a flyer that was in her purse because somebody littered a piece of trash on her way to a meeting to watch her grandson get celebrate 1 year in the program. She goes, this is for you. And I opened it up. There wasn't a website. There wasn't a phone number, nothing. All it said on that piece of paper, God has already forgiven you for what you've done. I mean, what other warning signs do you need? What other signs of miracles do I need? I look back at my 4 steps, saw how many times my higher power had saved me from death. For my sponsor to finally look at me and goes, what else is it going to take for you to understand that there is something greater out there that is keeping you alive? And that's the moment I believed.
And then you ended up becoming, and you talk about this in the book, incredibly spiritual person. And this has become a cornerstone.
Hugely spiritual.
And you say that, you say, here's the litmus test for every relationship, friendship, or intimate relationship that I have in my life. Yes, this includes family members. You're either pushing me closer to my spiritual center, or you are pulling me away from it. If you bring me close to that inner peace and spirituality, then you stay in my life. If you tear me away from that inner peace, I'm letting you go.
I use that for every barometer of my life. That is my litmus test, if you will. Taking a news term, that is my litmus test for you to be in my life. You're either bringing me closer to my spiritual center and bringing that positive energy into my life, or you're pulling me away. And you know what, Carey? I use that same litmus test for my family. You're either bringing me closer to my spiritual center, or you're tearing me down. Just because we're blood doesn't mean you get to poison my life anymore. I can love you from a distance. I can love you till death, but it does not mean I will ever put myself in a position to ever be verbally abused again.
What has been the hardest part of this journey, writing the book, going public?
The hardest part of the journey truly is, what are you going to do when your family reads it? And you know my response is, what makes you even think they're going to read it? They never called me on my AA birthday. They never asked me if I'm doing okay in recovery. They never asked me, hey, Brandon, are you still sober? How's sobriety?
But it is painful for you.
It is, of course. I mean, to sit there and say that I don't dream and fantasize about having a mom who would hug me and just look into my eyes and say, I love you. Who doesn't want that? Who doesn't fantasize, dream about that? But the reality is I have to snap myself out of that and realize that that's never going to be in the cards for me. But that's okay. You want to know why? I have a bunch of adopted mothers in my life who hold me, who give me a hug, and they look at me and they say how proud they are of me. It's sad that that can't come from my own mom. But at the same time, Carey, that's reality. And you have to accept reality, and you've got to move on.
Are you proud of yourself?
For the first time, I can actually say this. I used to think it was so narcissistic for somebody to stand in front of the mirror and say these words, you are enough. I love you. And that was the first time, that was a homework assignment that my sponsor gave to me. He goes, you will wake up every morning and you will stare at that mirror and you will say this, you are enough. I love you. And I was like, God, that's very narcissistic to sit there and say, I love myself. No, it is a key ingredient to having a successful life. I love the man I am today. I would never take back anything. Do I wish I had an easier road? Who the hell would want to go through the crap that I went through, right? Nobody wants to go through that, but I did, and I don't regret it. Why? Because it's made me the man I am today. Everything that I went through, all the trauma it went through, that I had to learn life lessons to become the man I am today. I love the man I am today, and I love where God's path is. And you know what the crazy thing is? I've got a podcast too. And guess what? It's Escaping Rock Bottom. I don't make a damn dollar off of it, Carey. I don't make a single buck off of it. But you know what I tell people? It is the most rewarding job I have ever had. I get to share people's stories who have experienced trauma like you couldn't even imagine, and they've come to the other side of it, and now they're out there spreading hope. I get to tell those people's stories. It's more rewarding than any Emmy Award or accolade in news I have ever gotten in my life, and I'm not making a buck.
Are you scared that
what my next job's going to get?
I mean, because,
am I going to get another job? I don't know.
I mean, our executive's going to look at this and think this is the guy we need to have as our main anchor.
Yeah. You know what? Listen, I can say this. I can't say where it is, but my agent just called me 2 days ago and said the general manager of a major network called. They loved my work. And my agent told that GM everything about my book. And you know what that GM said? That guy is one amazing guy. He goes, I love the fact that somebody could take something so traumatic and so dark in their life and then can turn it around to try and help people. That's my kind of people. So I'm glad that I don't have a skeleton in my closet anymore. And you know what? If that scares you, if you can't see the good that a recovered addict can bring into a working environment, then I don't want to work for you.
But I think this is an important point because life can be scary. And fear prevents us from so much. And you basically left a job that was a good job in Phoenix at a good station, and they liked you, and everything was
the most successful I've ever been in any news station, the most money I'd ever made. Everything was here in Arizona.
You packed up your car.
I gave it up.
You decided you were writing this book. You gave it up. You went to LA with a lot of question marks. You didn't know what was next.
And I still don't have a paycheck coming to me, and I still am now searching for that what's next. But I knew that this book was that what's next at that time of my life. I knew I had to do it. And I was burning out in the news cycle. I mean, doing as many shows as I was doing. At the end of the day, I didn't have the energy to focus on that. But that was more important to me at the time.
Tell people about what Mascara Boy means, because I think I'd be remiss not to mention this.
Not to mention, I'm now starting.
Because this was tough. I hope you don't mind me saying, but
even coming up with the title was very tough.
But this was this is a painful term.
Mascara Boy, it's very, so when I was a young child, people used to call me Makeup Boy. Yes, it does look like I wear eyeliner. I have very dark eyelashes. They used to call me Makeup Boy and Mascara Boy on my way to school, and call me Girly Boy because of my eyeliner, to the point that I went into my parents' bathroom, I got a pair of scissors, and I started cutting my eyelashes off because I didn't want to be called that anymore. And then it followed me into my news career. I would have viewers email me saying, man, why are you putting mascara on? You look like Johnny Depp, you queer, you fag, you homo. And then I had a news director, if you can believe this, walk into the makeup room, berate the makeup artist, saying, why are you putting mascara on him? He comes over, puts his hand on my face, pulls my cheek down to look and inspect my eyes, and goes, fine, he's not wearing mascara. We'll cover it up and make it go away. And so finally, when I came to the working titles of the book, this was the last one. And I was like, I don't know if I can make that the title of this book. And I did little mini focus groups, and everybody chose Mascara Boy. And I had to pray on it. And then I finally got to the point, I said, you know what? You all bullied me my entire life with this, but you know what? It doesn't hurt me anymore.
Because that's almost reliving your trauma, that title.
Very much so. But now I'm on the other side of it. And now I sit there and go, you know what? I'm all good now, because I really don't care what you used to say to me or what you thought of me. It did a lot of damage to my core and my soul. But you know what? Now it's the cover and the title of my book.
So what do you want people to take away from this book?
Here's the thing. I know how helpless and hopeless I was in the midst of my addiction, that I would sit in my room and cry. And I know that there are so many people out there who will never go to a 12-step room, who will never go to recovery. This is one way to carry the message of hope to that person. It's why I did the podcast. It's why I'm writing the book. I'm trying to hit everybody from every different media angle that you listen to, audiobooks. And I don't care. It's about getting that message of hope out there, not only to the addict, Carey, but to the mom and the dad who has an addicted child. They are helpless and hopeless. They don't know what to do. Yeah. This book, I want them to know the depths. That's why it was important for me to expose all my scars, so that people can say, oh, my son has it much worse than you. I didn't even want them to think that. I want them to look at this and go, dude, if Brandon can survive all of that and look at his life today, I'm not going to give up on my son or daughter, or my husband or wife. And
really, the book speaks not just to people
addicts
who are going through addiction. I mean, it's really walking through darkness.
It is absolutely that, because I wrote this, somebody already read the book this last week. They read it in 2 days. And you know what they said to me? They're like, Brandon, this is like a self-help book. Mm-hmm. I'm like, wow, I never even thought of it that way. Mm-hmm. Because I've always said this, at the 12 steps of the recovery program that I'm a member of, I've always sat there in the meetings being like, man, people who are not addicts can really grow from this stuff at its core. And so I'm like, this can be a perfect opportunity for me to show people who are not addicts that they can walk away learning and growing spiritual after reading this book.
What has been the reaction overall?
Amazing. I haven't had one person. I have yet to I've been on so many radio shows and TV shows. I have not had one single person say anything negative.
Because for a while you got off Twitter because there was too many trolls. Prior to this, when you were on the news.
Twitter, I just jumped back on. Yeah. I think I have 15 followers right now. I had to jump off because you know what it was? It's that same litmus test. You're either bringing me closer to my spiritual center or you're ripping me away. Twitter was so toxic for me that it was constantly ripping me away from my spiritual center. I was like, I got Trolls, go away. I don't care about you anymore. I was like, I had to break off, but I got back onto the Twitter game.
So what would you say now, where you are today, a man of strength and spirituality, and you love your life where you are? What would you say to the 7-year-old Brandon?
I love you. You are perfect the way you are. Because I dealt with so much gay shame in the 80s and 90s. You couldn't be out and be gay. You couldn't be a gay athlete back then. That I would love for somebody to sit there and who watched me singing Cyndi Lauper, and Whitney Houston in the living room, that they would look at me and be like, you're amazing the way you are. And I'd be remiss to say that my mom told me a story when I was 6 months old. She was changing my diaper and she was looking at me and she told me this. She goes, I looked at you at 6 months old as I was changing your diaper. And I remember looking up and saying to God, I hope he's not gay. So imagine growing up in that household. I would tell my 7-year-old self, everything's going to be okay. Love yourself. I love you just the way you are, and give myself a hug. Because that's one thing I've learned in therapy is I'm caring for that inner child in me that wasn't cared for.
And as we wrap things up, B, I wanted to ask you if you could just send a word of inspiration to the audience, because I know probably people will resonate with what you're saying on so many different levels.
Right.
But for people who want to unburden themselves from something, maybe it's a toxic person in your life, or you're trying to work your way through addiction, or any number of things, what would you say to them?
Oh boy. I always say to people, you mentioned that litmus test, and I tell people that all the time. It's a great barometer is find people, surround yourself with people who make you happy. Surround yourself with people who are successful, not money wise, but spiritually successful. And you look at their lives and they're smiling and they're laughing. Surround yourself with those people. The moment somebody starts talking to you about gossip or negativity, push them away. They are toxic in your life. But really, honestly, be able to stand in front of the mirror and be able to look at that reflection. Be happy with your weight. Be happy with the way you look. And just feel beautiful inside. The moment you do, you will attract such beauty around you in your life.
What's next?
I don't know. What is next? I'm super excited. I'm going next week speaking at the World AA Conference in New York City.
That's huge.
It is massive. And I'm standing alongside Margaret Cho. So I'm the keynote on Friday. Margaret Cho's the keynote on Saturday. It's amazing. The next thing, I just got a message today on LinkedIn about somebody asking me to speak and be the keynote speaker at a mental health conference.
Great.
My goal now, my journey, it's going to be in news. I know news will come around again, even though some people are like, you're never getting back into news. I'm like, no, I really think I am. But I'm going to go on the motivational speaking circuit because it is time for me to go out there. Listen, God has given us, Carey, skill sets and a gift, right? To publicly speak, be a good public speaker. God also gave me the gift of recovered addiction. So now I'm going to combine the two and I'm going to go out there and I'm going to be a motivational speaker and I'm going to rock this world. We're going to end the stigma. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to inspire people to be the best selves that they can be, that they too can quit whatever addiction is holding them back in life. That is what my purpose is in life.
And look how just me asking you that question and the way you respond, look how excited you are.
I know, a sparkle in my eye.
Right?
I was back in the newsroom at 3TV on Monday. Everybody said to me, they're like, my God, you just seem so much lighter and so much, like you're sparkle in your eyes. Your skin is bright. Like you just look like... You look so happy and at peace. And I'm like, how crazy is that I don't even have a job and look how happy and peaceful I am. It's crazy. But that's the gift of authenticity. Be authentic. Don't be afraid to show your scars. Just stand in your truth, be authentic. The world will see you much prettier as a human being that way than trying to portray an image of perfection.
Well, I love you so much. That goes without saying. And I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
Seeing you walk through this journey and what you've been able to accomplish getting on the other side of fear. And I think you'll be able to inspire and help so many people.
I hope so. Just one person.
It's incredible.
To save one life.
And remind people where they can find you.
You can always find me at escapingrockbottom.com. You can buy my book there, Mascara Boy, on my website. And also listen to my podcast, Escaping Rock Bottom. You can find it on iTunes, Google Play, and my website.
Your podcast is getting rave reviews.
It's getting incredible rave reviews. You know what that tells me? It tells me there's a need for the topic to be spoken about.
Yes.
That not enough people are talking about it. If I can start a podcast in January and have it jump to the charts that it is in the mental health section,
so good.
That means we need to continue talking about it.
It doesn't hurt that you have that voice. Come on now. All right, B, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on.
And thanks to all of you for listening and watching. You can always find all of our shows, podcasts, and content at inspiredmedia360.com. Until next time, stay inspired.